Hello there, everyone! Notice anything new? Yep, I have sprites in this video. Since this is going to be more of a tutorial video than my usual story time and story narration videos, where I personally find sprites like these distracting, I feel like I get away with it a bit for this video, since it's a tutorial, and will have a lot of empty space. So I made some, and I'll be using them today to show you how I use vector tools on Clip Studio Paint. Ready to do some learning? Let's go! To get started, I do want to reiterate that this is how I use vector tools. It may not be how you use them, or how you're supposed to use them. But this works for me, and my tips may work for you, so let's get started, and I'll teach you something new.
First, you may be asking, Daryl, I know where the vector tools are, but how do I use them? It's not working. Well, you may be trying to use them on a raster layer instead of a vector layer. So whenever you want to go and use a vector layer, instead of hitting this button right here, which will make a raster layer, you want to hit the button right next to it. It's called a new vector layer. You hit it, so when you make a line, and you go over to your vector tools, you should be able to use any of them, and it will register that you can use these tools on this layer. But what do these tools do? Well, I'm going to delete that file there, and I'm going to go over to my sprites. They're going to go one by one through different tools, and I'm going to show you how to use each of them. Now, to find the vector tools, you want to go to this one section of Clip Studio Paint called the Subtool Correct Line section. It'll show it right up here. Mine is all the way on the bottom, down by my ruler tools, but you might have yours on a different spot depending on how your program is set up, and depending on your own preferences. Your tools also may be in a different order. I have mine ordered in a way that is useful for me, but I'm going to be going down one by one on order of mine, but your program should also have all of these. So I'm going to have them set up, explain each of them in order from the order that I have them set up, rather than just the order that is going to be on the program the moment you open it up and get it. And so if you're a bit worried that I'm going off list, that's the reason why. Now, with vector tools does this thing where you will put down a stroke, and it'll have each line you make as a separate piece. So we'll make a new vector layer, we'll hide this one and the sketch layer on the other one real quick, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So let's say I have a stroke here, and a stroke here, and I make an X. I could take my vector tools. Well, for our sake and purposes, just because it's easier to see it, we'll use the control point tool, and I will explain what that does later. But as you can see, it registers each line as its own thing. Now, if I were to take something like the pinch vector tool and say I wanted to move this line around, look at that, it doesn't affect the line next to it, and I could do the same thing with the other line. So that's just kind of what that is. So we're going to get rid of that, and we're going to pull back up our sprite, and we're going to explain the tools, right? Good. Now the first tool is the control point tool, which you can find right here. It looks like this. When you make a line on a vector layer and select this tool, a series of points will show up on that line. So I'm going to actually make a line here, and we're going to make another line here. Just, get that arm up and going. So we'll keep it like this for now. So when I click on the control point tool, you'll see all these different points. And what I can do with these points is I can take them and I can move them. So I'll move this line. I tend to use this for really small details. I actually go in with the pinch vector line tool first for stuff like this. But whenever I have something like this here that I don't feel like erasing, I just drag it in. Can't see it anymore, it's gone. And I'll just use it to do some quick little cleanups like that. Just something nice and easy. You can also use it to delete control points. So for example, if you don't like, let's say I don't like this one right here, I can delete it, and it'll make the line, it'll still connect these points together, but it'll make the line straighter between them. I'm going to undo that because I actually didn't like that. There's switch corner, so you can make that a corner point. You can move control points, add control points, so if you want more flexibility into your line art, you can do that. You can also adjust the line width with it, just at a point, which is pretty cool. I tend to just mostly use it for editing. There's another tool that does this adjust line width bit that I prefer a bit more, but it can be useful whenever you need it. It's just a very specific tool. And now we're going to go on to another one, which is what I like to pair up with the control point tool. We call it the pinch vector line tool, and this tool is a godsend. It's my biggest lifesaver with line art. It makes doing line art so quick and easy, and it is probably the tool I use the most of all the vector tools, besides the eraser tool, but we'll get to that one later. Now, with the pinch vector line tool, what you could do is you could just grab your line art and just move it around. And I tend to do it when, like, say for this arm, for example, like when I did it, I didn't kind of like it. So what I would do is I was like, yeah, it's a bit too thin. So I take it and just drag it out a little. And I could drag it out to line up with my line art more. I typically use it, if you watch my videos a bit closely, you can see it when I use it a lot. But I try to use it for just like fixing up stuff that I don't like. I would be going back over it, like I want to hide that. And just, you know, just some details. If there's something too small that this can't grab, I will go back in with the control point tool. You can also adjust the settings for the tool for like the effect range, as well as the pinch level, and other adjustments, as well as like where it grabs it at, which you can do up here in fix end. You can connect lines when you move them, add control points when you grab them, just stuff like that. I keep my brush really small, with an effect range of 5 and a pinch level that's about at 60. That way I'm just, because I'm not taking it just wanting the stroke to be exactly the same and moving around. Like usually I'm making it because I want an adjustment. And you know, if you do something crazy like this, the line's gonna get really fucked up. But yeah, that's just how I like to use it. And it works really good for me. So we will be using that more and using that a lot when doing these sprites, because that's the tool I really enjoy using, is that pinch vector line tool. So the third tool we're going to be talking about is going to be the redraw vector line width tool. Okay? I use this tool a lot, and what it does is it just changes the width of your line art, and you can adjust the size of it, so you can make it thicker, or if it's like too thick, you go and make it thinner. What I personally like about this is I like making it a big size, and it goes with your like pen pressure. So if I do it really light, even with this big brush size, I can make it thinner, but if I do it really hard, it makes it thicker. And I just like the look that it gives my line art. There is one thing though, which is these like little annoying bits, so you gotta be a little bit careful. You can always adjust it with your pinch vector line tool or your control point tool to connect it. But besides that, this is a very good tool for stuff. And like I said, you could adjust the brush size with it, whether it's down here, up here, to make it thicker or thinner. And it's just like a nice, quick, easy way to get that like nice pen pressure stroke feeling with your line art. It's very good. Another one you can also use is the Simplify Vector Layer tool. You can use it to just smooth out bumpy line art if, say for example, I don't know if this one has one, let's say up here, I don't like how the shoulder is, so I want it to be a bit more flat. You can make it a bit more flat. It in a way, it kind of deletes, makes less control points, whereas this is it after I use it, and this is it before I use it. So it just kind of simplifies that down. It's very great if your line art is a bit bumpy and you just want to smooth it out a little, like say for here, just to give it a little bit of a smooth, flat look. It's very good for that. I don't tend to use it often, but you know, that's just that. Also, remember to adjust your stabilization settings on your Clip Studio Paint program, because some of the issues with your line art being a bit too bumpy might just be that your stabilization is down too low. And that's it. Now another tool that is very good with this is the Connect Vector Lines tool. So you got these, so when I take my pinch vector tool, I want this hair to connect, because this hair is not connected. And on my control point, I can see both of the points for each ends of this hair. I can take this one, put it there, and what it should do is it should connect them. So if you're ever worried about this whole connecting tools thing getting in the way of your strokes not being connected and want them connected, that will do that for you. It could be a bit finicky, but I like to do it when I'm about to go over my line width tool, as with back to my redraw vector line width tool. Sometimes if I connect two separate points together, like there they're connected, but say I wanted to, I'm trying to find a section of this that might work for it. With these fingers, for example, like see, it doesn't go over to this one, unlike with this hair though, where both of these are connected, and it does do that. So you get that nice smooth line in it. But whereas this one, it stops at the very end of this stroke, which is something you have to watch out for with this tool, but it's not necessarily so much of an issue so long as you know how to fix it. And then we're going to go over to another tool really quick for this set of line art, which is the Adjust Line Width tool. Now, if you're somebody who does not like the strokey, like, pen pressure-esque look of this line art, of the Redraw Vector Line Width tool, you rather have this more, like, uniform look, but you're like, oh, it's too thin or it's too thick. This is the tool that will help. You got all these settings over here. You can fix the width, scale down width, scale up width, narrow it, thicken it, and generally scribble over it, and it'll make your line art thicker. You can see it more if I just go over it with one spot. I tend to use it if I want my line art more uniform. You can use it however you want to use it. I like the look of the Redraw Vector Line Width tool better, just because I like that like pen pressure stroke that the brush gives me, and I could also, like, you know, if I want it thinner, I could just go over it lightly. I don't have to keep adjusting the settings like you do with the Adjust Line Width tool. But this is a good tool if you just want your line art to be more uniform in width and you don't want that pen pressure look. So it's a good tool to use and be aware of if that's something that you look forward to in your line art. And the last one we'll use, which is one I typically don't really use that often, is the Redraw Vector Line tool, but I'm going to go over it just because it's there. And generally what you do is if I go, hey, I don't like how the shoulder looks, I want to change it. Well, you could just go over it. And you could just go over it and change the line and change the direction that the line goes in. And it'll do it for the line for that stroke, if they're connected. So like with this eye, I could change this eye, but it only fucks around with the eye because I tapped on the eye stroke before the rest of it. I generally don't use this often. I haven't found a really good use for it in my own work, but perhaps if you're somebody who thinks this tool could be useful for you, then you could just go around and use it. I mean, I could see why it would be useful. I just prefer not using it myself. But this is a tool that is here in your arsenal, so use it for whatever. So another thing I want to bring up, which you're not going to find in the vector tool section, you're actually going to find it in the eraser section, and it is called the vector erase tool, or it's just labeled as vector. Now this is a eraser specifically used for vectors, and what makes it different from a regular eraser is I can just tap a piece of line art and boom, the whole thing is gone. I don't have to spend time painstakingly erasing it, which is one of the reasons why using vector tools for line art is really good, because it makes just erasing a bunch of like details so quick, so easy. I keep mine small just because like you don't even need to like do a bunch. If you got like little annoying stuff like that, which is like one of the downsides, I just do that. That's it. And I like rarely ever do in this much detail with line art before erasing it. I'm only doing it just because of the sprites. So you don't even have to worry about that often. That actually, because when I erase my line art for bits that I don't need or don't want, I'm typically still in the middle of drawing the line art itself. I haven't even thickened it or anything like that. The only reason why that you get these annoying little bits is because I had polished it as much as I did. and I have kept it all as vector layers because I knew I was going to be erasing and going over it as much as I currently am doing and will be doing for the rest of these sprites. So that's just basically it. So if you wanted to see the vector tool, the eraser tool specifically in action, the best way to use it is to do it before you go over it with your adjust line width tool, before you go over it to add your little details by hand with the line art. You always want to use this when you're putting your line art down, while you're making adjustments. It's really great for getting just those tiny little bits that stick out with your line art that you don't want to use the control point tool to cover. You just want to get rid of it. And it's a very, very good eraser tool. One other thing with the vector erase tool that I forgot to mention is that if you have two vector layers visible on top of each other and try to erase from one, it will take account into the vector layer behind it. You can adjust this over at the settings, but I tend to keep it on because sometimes I find it useful for certain stuff, especially if I'm doing something like small details on top of big details and I need to erase some of the smaller stuff. Just something to keep in mind when you're working on things. And those are the vector tools. Now, one of the things that I do want to keep in mind, I want to tell you guys a few things, so we're going to pull up our old line art for this again, is some stuff you can't do with vector tools. For one thing, you can't use the paint bucket tool on it. As you can see, I am trying to use every single setting for the paint bucket tool. You can't use paint bucket tool on it. So if you're somebody who has like really thick shadows that you use, that you put your like black shadows on with line art, say like Ghost Trick-esque art style, then this might not be the best tool. What you can do is you can rasterize your layer. So if you go over to your layered settings over here, click this little 3 lines, go down to rasterize, you should be able to fill it in afterwards. However, if you try converting it, if you go down back to those settings, go to convert layer, and try convert it back to a vector layer, it ends up pixelating your line art like this. As you can see, it's very pixelated. Now this might be really good for somebody who prefers to work with pixels. So if you work with pixel art primarily, or you use something like the let me pull it up really quick, the Turnip pen, which is a very pixelated pen, then you don't ever have to worry about it because it's pixelated already. So why would you worry about it being pixelated if you're converting back and forth? But if you're somebody who is using, say, what I'm using a paint called the Painty Sci Pen, which it was from a brush set that is not around anymore. I did try looking for it. It was by Chris Brushes, but it's very similar to the G Pen tool. If you are somebody who is using that tool, then using that conversion may not be as useful for you. So anything that you need vector tools to do for your line art, you want to do it before you convert it to a raster layer, and then you can start filling it in with the texture, the brush. So not so great for pixel art, not so great if you're trying to use the G Pen tool. Just but you'll put down your quality and pixelate your quality of your thing. But also if you want your line art to already be pixelated and you still want to work on it in vectors, maybe that's how you prefer to work on it. But those are a couple things to keep in mind when using vector tools. Just can't you really use the paint bucket, and trying to turn a raster layer into a vector layer pixelates your line art. Now, one other tip and trick, it's not related to vector layers, but if you are somebody who wishes to use the convert a raster layer into a vector layer, this will be very useful for you. So, and it's a trick that I use a lot. So, say you want to do small repetitive details like buttons, or I'm going to draw better buttons than that. Like, say you got like this like dot pattern that's supposed to be your buttons. I can draw better buttons than that. Hold on. There we... Oh, wait, hold on. Let me get that. There we go. Okay, perfect. This is a better brush to do this with. Say you wanted to use a different pattern with like buttons, or like let's say shoelaces. Be better if I had them intersecting. Or like anything else, bricks, whatnot. Well, I can help you out with that. So first you want to draw your design with a white pen, and you want it specifically to be white, and you'll find out why in a second. So we're going to do this Just a simple pattern reminiscent to like a shoelace pattern, right? So then once you got your line drawn, probably a bit neater than this, but however neat you want it to be, you go over here to your layer settings and you want to click the one next to it to pull up the layer effects area, okay? And you want to click this very first one for border effects, and you want your line to be black. And even if you're working with colored line art, you still want it to be black, and you want to adjust the line art width to how much you want it, okay? I'll talk to you in a minute about why you want your line art to be black. So you go back over to your layer settings, you go and you rasterize your layer. So now doesn't have a border on it, but you can add a border on top of that if you want. You're not going to want to do it for this trick, but that will make sure that the black line art is considered a part of this layer now, instead of being a separate thing, because this trick won't work unless you rasterize your layer. So then you want to go over to Edit, Convert Brightness to Opacity, and you got yourself some quick, easy line art. Look at that. So if I make a new layer under it, let's turn it green. Free line art. You can use it for shoelaces if you're somebody who likes detailed shoelaces. You can use it for details. You can use it for designs. And another thing you could do is you could, change the color of it. Now you want to make it black because, say, let's do it all over again. So let's make a smiley face. Okay, we're gonna make ourselves a little smiley face, and we're going to make our border, and I want my border to be this bright green. So we're going to do that. It's a bright green layer. So now I go do all the steps right. I'm going to rasterize it. I'm going to go change brightness to opacity, but I turned it gray. That's because it's going to turn it into a grayscale no matter what you do with it. So best thing to do is to keep it black. I think you could just change it. Yeah, and also it affects your opacity of your line art as well. So let's do our bright green. And as you can see, it affects the opacity of the line art. So you want to start with black because then it'll make your line art completely opaque and it won't be a pain in the butt to continue on with. Now here's why I always recommend vector tools to people, and it's what makes my life easier, not just in my art and comic work, but also in my animation work. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my timeline here for this. This is an old animation I did last year for school, and this is my timeline on my animation, right? So when I play it, this is what it looks like. You got this kick animation that's going on. Okay? So here's why I recommend this tool. Now, I don't know if for anybody who's not an animator or somebody who's new to animation, people who have been animating longer probably already know about it, but if you have heard of the 12 principles of animation, there's one principle called follow through and overlapping action. There's a really good video about it, and I will link that in the description for this, but the basic summary is that different objects have different weight, and because of that, aspects of your animation may move in different speeds. So for example, for my animation, I tend to separate it with the limbs, the body, and any extra stuff, and in this case, it's the cardigan and her hair. So Deb's body is going to move a different way than her hair is, and you got that with her hair here. It's adjusting, it's a lot lighter than her head is, so although her head's not moving anymore, her hair's going to move a little bit because of just that weight. So it's even the same thing when she goes for the kick, and she does, that's not the right timeline, there it is. She does the kick, and her foot's in the air, and that weight is still going through, that force is still going through it, but because her hair is lighter, the hair in the cardigan is moving more than her foot is, because they are lighter objects, and she is moving with a lot of force. So, how do I get that effect? I get it with vector tools! As you can see on my layers section over here, all of these are vector layers. 56 of them exactly. And a lot of these small movements, let's find a good one. Let's go with this one here, because this one's the more obvious one. When we look at her head, I had just taken the pinch vector tool for this head turn where she notices the thing that she kicks. She stops, but her hair's still moving. And I just took the vector tool to move around the hair a little bit more. And that's all it did. And I did it with bits with this. Some of it I had to go in so with the pen tool, but just like to get that cardigan moving, to get that hair moving a little bit more without having to constantly redraw it. And even when I did redraw it, all I had to do was just take the eraser tool and just erase the hair and not have to like worry about cutting in through the rest of my line art. So I got this, I wouldn't exactly say it was quick, this one took me forever, but this nice like fluid movement with this kick and this hair move, specifically because I took into account to the weight and the movement and was able to make slight easy adjustments using vector tool layers. So it saves time, it makes my animation look good, and it's just great for slight adjustments in animation. So it'll give your character a little bit of that extra action it needs, but you can play around with it and see what works, and just try it out on your own with vector tools.
And that should be about it. I hope these tips help you out and you can take what you learned into your own art. And if there's any seasoned vector tool users who know some things about Clip Studio Paint vector tools that I didn't cover, feel free to leave a comment about that down below. Artists are always learning and evolving, and I would like to see what had helped you work on your own line art. And if there's anything else you'd like me to make a tutorial involving Clip Studio Paint, let me know. I have a few in mind for the future, but having feedback can help me understand what people would like to see from me. Feel free to follow me on my social media links down below, and you can read both of my webcomics, In Harmony and The Shepherd of Oblivion, both linked down below as well. Thanks for watching, and get to drawing!